Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Artist Loft drawing class. I'm your instructor, Adrienne Hodge, and I'm thrilled to be partnered with Michaels to bring you this ongoing drawing series with some free classes and some premium classes. So if you are new to this drawing series, this class is weekly, occurring on Wednesday evenings at the same time, 6 p.m. Central Time. And we cover a wide range of mediums and topics, all within the Artist Loft brand of drawing supplies, of which there are a lot of things. So tonight we're going to be working with the Artist Loft colored pencils. And next week we'll be doing some stuff with the wooden mannequin, doing some figure drawing. And then the following week will also be some figure drawing using the wooden mannequin and graphite. So check those classes out and make sure you sign up. One of the next two classes on figure drawing using the wooden mannequin is a premium class. So there's a small fee, but if you've been joining for a while, then you know that those premium classes have a lot of content that people really want to take part in if they miss out on it. The YouTube recordings are posted for all the free classes the next day, except for when it's a premium class, then the YouTube recording is only sent to those who registered for the class. So we'll go ahead and dive right in here. I'll switch to my tabletop view. So I've been providing a lot of reference images recently for a lot of classes, but tonight I asked everybody to get their own reference images, but I will have my reference images on screen for you to use. So I'm going to be drawing 3 different hairstyles here, straight and wavy hairstyles. And but before I talk about the rest of the supplies, just want to mention where you can find me on the internet. So I'm Adrienne Hodge Art on Instagram. And after every class, I hop over to Instagram and do a little live Q&A for 30 minutes directly after class at 7:05 p.m. Central Time. So if you want to join me there, if you have any lingering questions at the end of class that don't get answered in the hour, then that's where I will be. And I also leave that 30-minute Q&A up on my Instagram, so you can watch it later if you don't catch it live. And then here's just my business card and where else I can be found online. Facebook, Adrienne Hodge Fine Art, and there's my email. And here's some of my personal work if you're interested that I do using primarily calligraphy ink. And then don't forget to tag your work with the hashtags Make It With Michaels or Michaels Classes, or you can tag me so that I will be sure and see your posts, because sometimes they get a little buried in those hashtags since there's so many things tagged Make It With Michaels and Michaels Classes. There's a lot of these online classes. Okay, so pretty simple supplies tonight. We just need a drawing or sketching pad, I've got Artist Loft sketching pencils here, and then I have the 36-piece set of colored pencils. But depending on the color of the hair that you're drawing, you might need different colors than the ones that I've selected tonight. So I'm going to be drawing these from these 3 photographs. I've got this photograph of my son and his glorious curls that I had put up in a little updo one day while he was eating a piece of toast, and that's that photo that I worked from. And then this is after a very fun haircut that I had a few years ago, where I took some photos of my haircut. So that one has a lot of really great reflective light happening on the hair there, which is really good. If you can find a photograph that's got a lot of natural reflective light like that, that would be optimal. And then I have one photo that's black and white because I just wanted to work on a grayscale a little bit and kind of talk about how to use the white and gray and black to blend, but also, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I was going to talk a little bit about leaving the paper blank for highlights as well. All right, well, I'm just going to dive in if there are no questions about supplies.
Sorry, it doesn't seem like there's any questions about supplies so far.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to move this over and actually use a different drawing pad so I can refer back to that drawing easily if I need to. Okay, so drawing hair, that is something that in pretty much every class I've ever taught, somebody always wants to know what the hack is for drawing hair. And if you've been following along with me for a lot of these Artist Loft classes, you're probably noticing that my approach to drawing pretty much anything is going to be fairly similar. It all boils down to the value shapes, the shapes of the light and the shapes of the dark that you're seeing in a subject, and contours, the contour lines. So the directional flow that the hair is following. I'm going to put my other drawing back up here just to compare the photograph to the, a little bit here. Okay, so I was working from that picture there for that particular drawing, and so following the directional flow, or like in the photo of my son's hair, how the waves and curls might dip and the elevation will change. So I'll go in depth in that because I'm going to go pretty step by step through these photographs, but all these same rules are going to apply to any photograph of hair. The main thing, like the main soundbite, if I had to teach a 5-minute class on drawing hair, would be don't approach the hair as the individual strands. Like, yes, there are going to be some individual strands that you're going to want to focus on, but it's more about emphasizing things that stand out to you. So for example, in the photograph of my son, he's got this one curly tendril hanging down in front of his face, right? But it's not just one strand of hair, it's several hairs that are clumped together to create this curl, right? And then down here, there's this little wave coming down off the bottom of, this little tendril that's falling out at the bottom here. But again, it's not one strand of hair. It's a lot of hairs that are clumped together to create these tendrils or curls. And then there's this little moment that's sticking out right here. So those are kind of the 3 main moments that I highlighted when I'm drawing this overall shape. So you want to think of the overall shape of the entire mass of hair. And folks who have been here for lots of classes will recall when we drew trees, I talked about the mass of the leaves of the tree. Rather than trying to draw every leaf on the tree, you're looking for the overall shape that the mass of leaves is creating. And then within that, you're looking for these few interesting moments that stand out. So if I'm just drawing the overall mass or shape of, so those are the main takeaways. If, like I said, if I was doing a quick little, 5-minute class here, it would be draw the whole shape of the hair, not individual strands. Find moments that you want to emphasize and make sure those are represented. And then the shapes of the highlights and the shapes of the dark. So those are the main points that I'm going to come back to throughout the class. I would recommend for just the sketching portion right now, you use something like a 2H or a 4H, a very light pencil. And I'm going to use a heavier pencil, like a 6B, just so that you guys can see my lines. So I want you to draw super lightly. And if you're not familiar with the H&B pencils, the very first class that we ever had in this series was called Intro to Graphite and Drawing Forms. You can refer back to that class on YouTube, and that will have just a whole breakdown of the letters and numbers on the side of the graphite pencils. But all you really need to know right now is that an H pencil is very light and a B pencil is dark. And I want you to use an H pencil so that you can erase your lines if you need to in the sketching phase. I'm only using a B pencil so that you can see my lines. If I were drawing in my studio by myself right now, I would start with an H pencil. Just because it's easier to erase. Okay, so I'm looking at this overall mass of hair. So I'm not worried about any individual strands right now. I'm looking for the overall shape. Like if I were to outline on the photograph the whole mass of hair here, this shape. And not even worrying about those 3 moments that I talked about, just this shape. One thing I like to do to help me see shapes that I'm trying to draw is to not think about them as what they are, but think about what else that shape could be. So let's say this shape right here, what else could this be other than a mass of hair? It could be, I'm gonna draw it and then you guys can tell me what else this shape could maybe be. And I'm gonna use up a full page for each one of these drawings just to maybe,
Mildred said ice cream. Allie said island. Ivy said cloud.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, ice cream or an island or a cloud. Great. Okay, and so if that were an island, I like an island because an island's going to have, you know, certain coastal plains that we want to get in there. So we want to make sure that, you know, this dip and curve here is happening in the right place. But since we're not really attaching these hairstyles to heads tonight, we're not going to worry about proportions of heads or anything like that. We just want to get something that resembles hair, right? So we're just focused on the hair. So yeah, I like an island because then we can get all these little protrusions to happen in the right way. Okay, so that's I was also thinking a brain, but then a brain is pretty close to a head shape. So I was trying to get away from. All right, this is why I don't want you to use a B pencil because I'm smearing my lines everywhere as I adjust there, but I wanted you to be able to see that shape. Okay, and then now that I've got that main shape in there, now I can add the shape of this tendril falling down and do the same thing with these individual moments that you're emphasizing. Think about what else could that be? Because for some reason, when our brains name the thing that we're drawing, I mean, there's a lot of reasons and I know exactly what they are, but when you're telling yourself this is a tendril of hair, it makes it so much more challenging because your brain has all of these kind of stock images, you know, stored in your memory of what a tendril of hair looks like. And you assign this difficulty level to a lot of things when it comes to drawing, like, oh, a tendril of hair is really hard to draw, but a noodle, that's not so hard to draw, right? Or a ribbon on a balloon, or if we're doing a map theme here, we could say a river or a stream. Okay, so, and I draw a lot of clouds in my personal work, and I teach a lot of how to draw clouds and, you know, landscapes, and same thing with trees, but I say it with clouds a lot. It doesn't have to look like that cloud. It just has to look like a cloud. And that's the same thing with a you know, tendril of curly hair. It doesn't have to look like that tendril of curly hair. It just has to look like a tendril of curly hair. So as long as it's twisting and curving in a way, you know, think about the elevation, how it maybe overlaps itself, right? It is like a ribbon that has this moment where it twists and turns around. So think about giving it some dimension like that. Okay, and then we've got this moment where this part is sticking out. And then we've got this shape of these curls coming down here. And same thing, we just want a big twisty thing to happen. It doesn't have to look exactly like that particular curl on the head. Okay, so every photograph of hair that you're looking at is going to have something like that. There's going to be a stray hair or a flyaway, or you know, something that's sticking out from that overall mass that's going to feel more interesting or like you want to highlight it. So if you're drawing from a different photograph, not mine, just, you know, pick out what those moments are. Okay, so we've accounted for all of those interesting hair moments. So now we want to look at the elevation or the contours of the overall mass here. And this is where you do want to get a little bit more specific, especially with wavy hair, because, you know, just like with capturing a likeness of anything, if you go too much from your imagination of it, if you kind of do what I said here, where you just draw a, you know, like a stream or whatever, it maybe won't lend itself to the likeness of that person's hair, or it might just not feel as realistic. So you do want to kind of map out certain elevational points. So for example, right here is where, well, and all the highest elevational points are going to be where the light is hitting it the strongest. So talking about the shapes of the highlight and the elevation go hand in hand. But so I'm just going to talk about both of them at the same time. But up here, like this highlighted moment, I'm just kind of capturing that there's like two parts right here where this curl curves up. So there's a curve up right here, and there's another curve up, and then there's a curve down, and then another curve back up. Like a little roller coaster here. So, and then there's also a big shape of a highlight right there as well. So anywhere these highlights are going, you want to draw, well, I want you to be drawing lightly all along. But where these highlights are going, I want you to sketch really lightly. And if you've sketched too dark or your lines are hard to erase when we go to add the colored pencil, you might want to just sketch it again with a lighter color in the hair. Like in this hair, I'm going to be using these colors, medium brown, golden yellow, dark brown, black, light brown, red brown, and yellow ochre. And those are pretty much the same colors I'm going to use for the photos of my hair as well, except for the black and white one. But you might start sketching with like the yellow or the yellow ochre. That way, you know, you're drawing with something nice and light that can be easily blended back in your pencil lines. And also, we want to leave certain areas blank for absolute highlights. On his hair, I'm mostly going to put that yellow ochre or yellow right here in these highlights, and the light brown and the red brown. But on the other one, I do want some white paper showing through some highlights. So if you've got some just really strong highlights in the hairstyle that you're looking at, just make sure that you're leaving the paper blank in those moments for the highlights. And I am going to switch to my H pencil because I am just smearing these dark lines too much around with my left hand tonight. Okay, so now I'm just filling in all these other highlights, and they're not, I mean, everything is important to capturing likeness if you're really going for absolute realism, but just don't get too bogged down with, oh, I didn't put that curl in the exact, you know, right place in the overall shape of this island here, right? Just try to get the standout moments to be as close to the shapes that you're seeing as possible. But breaking it down into parts like this is very helpful. You know, it can even be helpful if you had like a viewfinder that comes with that Artist Loft 101 kit. I'm not sure if that's the one I put on the supply list, but you could easily make a viewfinder just by covering it up. Or the other thing that I like to do is, just if I'm looking at the photograph on my phone, just zoom all the way into that particular part that I'm drawing, because I've got this overall mass here where I've mapped it out. So I don't need to worry about if I'm in the right place. I know I'm in the right place if I'm drawing this area right here. So I can really zoom in and look for these shapes of light. So, and do the same thing that we did where we said, you know, the overall mass of the hair looked like an island. You know, do that for every shape of highlight if you need to. Like this looks maybe like the Batman symbol right there. Let me let it focus a little bit. Like right there, I'm seeing like the Batman symbol in that little highlighted moment, which is really specific, but it really helps to do that. Okay, people are saying, I saw someone say the 2H is really hard to see, so I'll switch back to my B pencil. So I'm seeing a little highlight right here that looks sort of like a Batman symbol. So I'm just saying if you wanted to get really specific with some of these highlights, you could do that. And the more specific you get with these highlights, the more information you're going to have when it comes time to add the color. You're basically creating a little paint by numbers for yourself of all these different areas of light and dark that you're seeing in the hair, because all of these highlighted parts here are the ones that I'm going to use those lighter colors on to fill in, and using the blank paper underneath to make those stronger highlights feel more emphasized. And then I'm going to use the darker colors and the black and all these darker shadows here. But I'm always going to be, as I'm applying that color, I'm going to be following the contours or the elevational lines of the form of the hair. So notice where that is happening. Even in this dark area right here, the hair is following this elevational path like this. It's curving out right here. There's a big curve out, and there's a highlight right here that I can outline. And there's another highlight here, and there's a highlighted curl sticking out right here. So the more elevational mapping you can do, the more you're going to have to go by.
Adrienne, we had a couple people ask, would you use the same techniques for animal fur?
Yes, definitely. And actually got a class that I just submitted for April. I've got a pet portrait class that you can look out for happening in April. It's going to be a 2-part class using pen and ink. And so if you're curious about specifically pet portraits and pet fur, that's, or dog fur, cat fur, or any pet, any animal, I'm going to be using a photograph of a dog for that class, but that's coming up. Oh, and then it's also fun if you want to put in, well, we don't really have to do this right now. We can do this with the colors itself, but these little flyaways, you know, keeping, just noticing where these little interesting points happen. If you were working on toned paper, then using your white or your yellow or any, you know, highlighted color like that to do those flyaways would be very interesting right there for those moments. I work primarily with calligraphy ink, like I said, and I use a lot of white ink on different colored backgrounds, and you know, like in the business card that I showed you, but I love when I'm doing hair and ink to just get those highlights to happen, those little flyaways to happen with some white ink. It's so fun and easy to make it look really cool using that material. Okay, so that's pretty good for our overall shape of the hair and the main highlights, and we've created a little map for ourselves. So I like that somebody said that it looked like a map of an island, because the map is so, because it is like a map. We just created a map of the contours and the value shapes. Okay, so we're ready to add some color here. And if your pencil lines are getting in the way and you want to, you know, start over, like I said, and just draw this whole map using yellow, ochre, and yellow, I would suggest that would be a good way to start. You probably wouldn't have seen any of my yellow lines if I had done it in yellow, so I chose to do it in pencil. Okay, so you can start with either the highlights or the shadows, and then we're going to bounce back and forth between the two. I like to start with the darkest shadows, but that is my preference. If that scares you to start with the darkest darks and you want to start with the lights and work your way up to the dark, then do what you feel most comfortable with. But I've got the dark brown, and this is really going to end up being almost black in a lot of places in these darker shadows in the hair, but it's important to get, so if I was again doing like a 5-minute class here, another thing that I would tell you to do is use at least 3 colors in any one part of the hair. So I wouldn't just use dark brown and black right here. I would try to put a 3rd color in there just to give it some extra dimension, because we want it to have a lot of dimension. So this is where, you know, drawing each individual strand comes in, but we're not necessarily drawing individual strands now. We're not picking apart an individual strand within the hair as we're adding these dimensional colors. We're following the contours that we outlined for ourselves. So it's also just another way to trick your brain into being observational, is to follow those contours rather than labeling it as hair. So keep trying to think about it as a map of some sort. And I would resist the urge to just like take my pencil and be like, well, this is all going to be dark brown, so just, you know, and just start coloring it in like with straight lines, because then you're completely getting away from the contours and it's wavy hair. So we need all of the color that we're adding to follow this curve. Even if it's all going to end up pretty solid black when we're done, that you will still notice those curves and that dimension. You're creating an optical illusion on the page every time you're drawing, and the viewer is given information, and the information that you're giving the viewer is, you know, their eyes are collecting that visual information and they're reading the image as what it is. And so if we're trying to make the eye read this mass of color and lines and shapes as hair, that's wavy and curled and on the side of a round head, right, then we need curved lines. If we were to just fill this all in with like horizontal lines right here, then we're telling the viewer that they're looking at something that's flat, and it's not flat. It's very, very rounded and curved. So, okay, so I'm filling in a lot of this with dark brown, and I'm following my map here, and I'm aware of the time. I'm like taken up almost half the class just to do this hairstyle. So I'm gonna zip it along a little bit here so I can get to the other two, although that last one is gonna go pretty quick. The black and white one. So I'm gonna go a little faster here, and if I go too fast for you, there will be a recording of the class that you can refer back to tomorrow. So you can always watch this class, watch the playback and slow it down and pause it, you know, to see exactly how I'm filling in these various colors. But I've moved on to my black now, and I'm just doing the same thing. I'm quickly filling in these contours and the low lights and shadows in the bottom part of the hair. Moving my hand in a lot of different directions so that my hand can easily move quickly as I follow those contours. But that's also just a thing I'm doing for speed. But it definitely helps to practice switching your hand in a lot of different directions. I know we've got a lot of absolute beginners in the class, so those are just some things I like to point out that come with lots of practice. You start to notice that switching the, you know, direction of your hand can help you control your lines in different ways. So practice doing that. Like maybe bring the pencil in from the top, or do it from underneath, or do it from the side, you know, see what kind of control you have, and if it's easier to make big sweeping lines if you hold your hand in a different way. Okay, so I said I wanted to get a third color in here, even though that's pretty dark, just putting a little bit of the light brown in there for, oh, sorry, that's the yellow ochre. Here's the light brown. You know, just in a few places, even if I don't see any highlights in this part of the hair, it's still gonna help create that optical illusion of this big connected mass right here, because especially if you kind of got away from the elevational mapping of the hair as you were going, then that will visually tie it together for the viewer that those colors are represented throughout. So feel free to take some creative license in doing that. Okay, and while I've got the light brown, I'm just moving into the more mid-tone areas of the hair as well. I really want this light brown to be everywhere, because that's probably the color that's being reflected the most. I just can't help but talk about my son's hair a little bit here. He's such a little anomaly in our family lineage. Nobody else really has this gorgeous curly hair like him. My grandmother did. Well, I wonder if it skipped a generation and graced him. I'm jealous of it all the time. But isn't that how it always is? If you have straight hair, you're envious of curly hair, and vice versa. We always want what's on the other side. Anyway, Okay, so there's the light brown, and I'm gonna get the yellow ochre going, and now I'm coming into the highlights a lot more, so I'm just being really aware of the directional flow that those highlighted areas are taking. And we're gonna have a lot of blending of these colors, so it's gonna be a few different layers of this to really get it. I'm gonna press down a little harder with my highlighted colors so that I can fill in those areas a little in a really strong way. And I want that golden yellow, which isn't that far off from the yellow ochre, but and then I want that red brown. So I'm just looking at where I'm seeing that red brown. A lot of people have a hard time seeing various colors in their source images that they're looking at. Like, I mean, I've been teaching a long time, and I've encountered a lot of moments where people get a little frustrated with me, where I'm like, you know, just pick 3 or 4 colors out of that subject. Just, you know, it's easy. And they're like, all I see is brown. I do not see 3 or 4 colors right there. Like, I just see red brown, or I just see, you know, whatever color is jumping out at you the most. And there are a couple of different apps. Well, there's one called Palette Cam that I use a lot in painting classes, where you can it's on iPhone, it's called Palette Cam, but if you have an Android, you can search Palette Cam and you'll find the Android version of it. But you upload your photograph into it, and it'll have a little view, like a little circle that will go over each color, and then you tap the circle at the bottom and it'll grab that color out and create a palette separate from the photograph at the bottom. And that just, when you pull that color out separately, then you can see it. And it's, you know, it's just something that also comes with lots of practice and looking, and you know, over time you'll start to pick out those colors more and more. Like, for instance, in sunsets, I've had a lot of people in painting classes painting sunsets and landscapes, and they're like, oh, the sky and the water is just not quite right. Like, there's something missing, you know, there's like another color that I'm not seeing. And I'm like, well, you know, it's always like a peachy color. It's actually a lot like this, like a peachy color that happens in sunsets. And once you notice it, it's everywhere. It's like all over the sunset. And then it'll, you know, if it's in the sky, it's going to be reflected in water on the ground, etc. And anyway, once, you know, you pull it out and like see it separately like that in a palette, like in that Palette Cam app, then it's easy to see where that color is occurring all over. And matching things with the colored pencils, you know, might be a little tricky. You might even use something like gold, you know, if you're seeing, like, the more I look at this hair here, I feel like maybe gold would help in these highlights. Okay, so I'm gonna have to be like a cooking show and switch to my completed souffle here, or else I'm gonna run out of time. But basically, we just want to keep doing what I was doing there and overlapping multiple layers until we, you know, get this mass to feel nice and full. So everything that I was just doing, do that lots of times. And I may be kind of forced a little bit of a shape here, like a bun right here. That's not quite happening as much. I feel like I got a little more accurate to what the hair was actually doing in this drawing. But anyway, in this drawing, I kind of created a little bun. So I got away from my following the elevational path at some point there, but still effective. Okay, I'm going to switch to the straight hairstyle here. So I'm going to do that same one. And I'm just going to jump in with the lightest color. So I'm going to use either light brown or yellow ochre. And I'm just going to sketch the overall shape of the hair, like a helmet here. And I am going to have to put a little bit of the shape of the face into this one, but I'm not going to worry about, you know, facial proportions or anything too much. So I've got kind of a, it really is like a helmet, this shape here. Or let's see, let's give it another, what shape could we give this other than a helmet? Because that's too much like a head. I want something that's not that's not related to a head. Give me some shapes, y'all. What else could this be other than the shape of hair? Maybe like a rainbow with a, you've got like, this is the rainbow, only it's more of a long stretchy rainbow, and then the bangs could be also a little rainbow. An acorn. Ooh, I saw that. That's a nice one. Cantaloupe. Oh, I like cantaloupe. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Because the cantaloupe, even when you kind of cut the inside of the cantaloupe out, you'll have like an uneven ridge like that. That's good. Okay, so yeah, whatever you have to label it in your mind to not label it hair, because just, you know, psychologically speaking, anything that we associate with people, immediately we're like, hard, that's too hard to draw, it's too difficult, you know, and we just make it so much harder than it has to be. I saw someone said horseshoe, great. But yeah, all these other things, it's like, well, I can draw a horseshoe, I could draw a cantaloupe, right? It's really about that internal dialogue that we have sometimes that tells us things are harder than they really are. Okay, so I kind of got away from the actual shape of what's happening right here. Let me erase a little bit of this. I'm not going to worry too much about, you know, perfectly capturing anything here. Like I said, it doesn't have to look like that hair exactly. It just has to look like hair. So we can go ahead and put some of these more interesting flyaways in there. Okay, and then now where are the absolute highlights and where are my absolute shadows and what directional path are they following? So I've got this big reflective light moment happening. All across the crown of the head. And it follows a little zigzag pattern. Do that at the top too, but you know, I'm not perfectly matching the zigzag line that I'm seeing in the photograph. I'm just getting a zigzag line going. And then if I wanted to do that for all of the various colors that are popping out at me, I'm seeing like a red brown shape right here. And then this is probably the most interesting part that's happening at the top here is there's like a big crease. This is like the type of thing only coming from the salon my hair will do, but getting this like very clean little separation to happen right there. That really, that part is what I emphasized the most in my drawing here. So I want to account for that. And then how the bangs feel a little bit separated from everything else. And I could even go ahead and switch to my dark brown pencil for a lot of this. It's going to end up being dark brown and black. And then I've got a bit of a jagged line on the bangs. And then same thing I was doing with the wavy hair, only now I'm following more of a straight path, but I'm gonna kind of within that flick my wrist a little bit and get a lot of these contours to happen to kind of follow this. It's like an upside down bowl shape, or like the cantaloupe right here. So I want those contours to be followed. And then I've got a really dark mass right here. A jagged line at the bottom. And there's this one piece that's, excuse me, separated from the rest of the mass there. I'm not going to remember the artist's name correctly, so I'm going to look it up right after the class is over. I'm going to make a little note to myself. It's a Japanese artist who I've followed on Instagram for years. It starts with an M. I'm just making a little note to myself to look her up when the I'll give you guys incentive to join me on my Instagram live Q&A after this. I was obsessed with how she draws hair several years ago, and you would think when you look at her drawings that she's drawing every individual strand, but she's really, you know, following this method here. I want to say it's, I don't want to misspeak, but I think it's Momo Corrado is her Instagram handle, Momo Corrado. That could be wrong. I'm going to look it up as soon as we end the class, and I'll say it on my Instagram live if that's wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's it. Okay, so I've moved to the black and I'm just filling in those darker shadows here. And then I'll go ahead and just bounce around to all the places where that black is really prominent. And again, we're just following the contours, following the colors that we're seeing in any part of the hair. And then we're going to fill those in with 3 to 4 colors in any area. So there's a bunch of this red brown up here. And then I'm being careful to leave the highlighted areas pretty blank, because I'm going to let the blank paper do the work for me there. It's getting a little too orangey. I guess it's more of the light brown that just feels reddish. So I'm just following those contours that I mapped out for myself. And I accidentally just went into the highlighted areas, and that's okay. Just gonna pull back a little bit and try not to do that too much. Now I've got the medium brown. And yeah, once I've mapped everything out, I almost don't even need to look. Well, you do want to refer back to your photo a lot, but you know, sometimes you can refer to your photograph a little too much when it comes to things like this, and then get really hard on yourself because it doesn't look exactly like, you know, every shape that you're seeing on that head of hair. And what I like to do is just try to make sure that those moments that I'm trying to emphasize are emphasized. So like this little separated piece right here and this separated piece, you know, putting those little details in can really bring life to it. Or like this part right here, this little flyaway moment there. Switch to my completed souffle here. So sometimes when I make these demos, I probably go way over an hour because I'm just, you know, I get in the zone and I just keep adding layers to things, and I forget that I'm trying to squeeze this all into a 1 hour class with instruction. So might take a little bit more time to build the layers to get to this, but eventually, you know, you'll get there. And then I did use a little bit of the white to blend into it as well, just to help with the blending. You can also use the colored pencil blender to do this as well, but that blender is going to need something to grab onto, or the white's going to need something to grab onto. So if I start trying to use the white to blend at this point, I might not get the same effect that I you know, will if I do that after multiple layers. Any questions about that one before I move on to the last one here? I'm going to go really quickly for this last one. Okay, so I'm just using black and gray and white for this last photograph. And I did kind of cut off the top of my head in this photo here, so I just wanted one black and white one. So looking for the overall mass here is maybe like a ghost with a, I mean, it's the same shape as the other one, it's just a little longer. So we could do like the half bowl or the cantaloupe shape up here, only the hair is kind of falling across the face a little more. I've maybe gotten away from proportions a little bit with this one, but I'm not too worried about it. So it's a lot more a little messier than the last hairstyle, but similar shape. And then I'm just looking for these interesting moments. So this highlighted moment right here, and you could, you know, call that like a blade of a knife maybe, or a big, a long pointy leaf, you know, whatever shapes, or a little wishbone, or the letter V right here, like a, that's what I'm seeing there, icicle, whatever you have to label it so that it's not such a challenging thing for you. And then I'm just going to switch back and forth between my black and my gray here, and then leave things blank for the white areas. So where is it really black? There's only a few moments that stick out as black, and that's this shape here, this shape, this shape, and then this whole area. And then there's one big wavy moment here that's really dark. And then the rest of it is pretty light gray with just a few little patches of black. I've definitely gotten away from likeness a little bit with this one, but I'm just going for the mass of the hair and the feeling of the hair and the sense of contours and shapes here. this is another one that would be really cool to do on toned paper because the white would stand out so much. And when you get those white highlighted shapes in there, but trying to use the white right now isn't going to do much until I get a lot of black and gray going for it to grab onto. So now I'm just following those contours. I want to leave little spaces for the highlights. Go ahead and switch to this one again. So there's a lot more gray than black. And then I just left the paper blank for the white, but I did use the white to blend it at the very end. All right, well, any questions about this one before, I'd love to see some of y'all's drawings before we end here. Does anybody want to hold up their drawings and see yours so far, where they are? Oh, look at that. That is lovely. Really nice. Oh yeah, I'm definitely getting a sense of dimension there. Oh, look at those. Wow, that all three of those are just popping off the page. Oh, that is gorgeous. So fun. Oh, nice. I love all the different colors that you're using there. Love it. I love the notes too. So satisfying. Oh, those are so nicely blended. Yeah, that's really looking good. Oh, wow. I love that one. Oh, I love that you're challenging yourself with a different photograph too, and that's really coming to life. That can't be your first time drawing hair. Sort of. Very nice. Oh, these look so good, everyone. So fun. Oh, yes. I love when I see people using different photographs too, because then you really, oh, that, and I love how you got that specific little moment where there's a flyaway. It really feels three-dimensional. Very nice. Oh, I can tell that's my son's hair, but I love how there's a little bit of a stylized difference to it. That's great. But you still got those contours and the overall form. Oh, that's really fun. Oh, it's you. Recognize your hairstyle there. Very nice. Yeah, and I love how you got that little twist moment to happen. It really feels three-dimensional in there. And the little cowlick as well on the bangs. Very nice. Yes. Oh, I love it. Yeah, really look and try to see what other colors you could get in there that would really push the dimensions. Maybe a mid brown, a medium brown. Oh, that's gorgeous. Oh, these are so good. Yeah, those little moments of depth that are happening really just push the three dimensions there so much. I love it. Well, please, if we didn't get to spotlight you, post, or if we did spotlight you, I'd love to see these posted on social media, and tag me so that I can be sure to see them, and tag Make It with Michael's and Michael's classes. There's always so much lovely art shared at the end of the class, and then sometimes people don't ever post it, but that's okay if you don't want to share on social media, but I'd love to see it so that I could share it as well. Okay, well, thank you everyone for another wonderful class, and hopefully I'll see you for the next one, or on Instagram Live for the Q&A, and we can talk more about what we covered tonight and what's coming up in the series. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.